My favorite story, I have to start, and I know you've heard it a million times.
I love it.
But it's my favorite story. So I used to tell ghost stories at the Stevenson County Historical Society at Halloween. They had a one-room schoolhouse, and they would invite me. Years ago, I wrote ghost stories for the Journal Standard, and it was a feature story. I was a freelance writer. And so to get more stories, I would volunteer to go to places like that, and I would tell my story, and then I'd say, so does anybody have a story? And I'd write it down. So I was there at this Halloween event, and I told my stories, and then this one woman stood up, and she's kind of grandmotherly, and very sweet woman, and she said, I just come back from visiting my daughter, my son-in-law, and my grandkids in Pennsylvania. And she said they live in an old house. And you know, out on the East Coast, those houses are lots older than here in the Midwest. So she said they had finished dinner, and then they'd all moved from the dining room into the living room, which was adjacent to the dining room, but the dining room lights were turned off, and she was seated in this chair, but you know, she could see the dining room over there, and they're having this conversation, and suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, she sees this little boy, and he's dressed in period clothing, and he just walks through the dining room, and he disappears into the wall. And she said, the surprise must have shown on my face, because my 4-year-old grandson came over to me, took my hand and patted it, and said, don't worry, Grandma, that's just the attic people.
I have an attic story that I just came across in the paper not too long ago. A lady was living in the house with her family, and they hadn't lived there very long. And she started having things happen, lights going on and off, the doors opening. And she was not really sure, because she had a little girl that was about 2 years old. So she thought, well, you know, maybe I'm just, whatever, imagining it. But in the middle of the night, her daughter started to scream. So she went running in her room, and the daughter could talk pretty well. And she said, there's a little girl here. And she's like, no, honey, there's no little girl here. And she goes, yeah, she's coming from the attic. She's coming through the ceiling in the attic. And the little girl was the first one to see this little girl. But the sightings grew. And the woman didn't see her for a while. Her husband actually saw her first. And usually it's the other way around. Women, especially with children ghosts, they usually experience the children first. And the husbands are like, really? But this one, he said he was sound asleep on the couch. Well, you know, he was watching football, but he was asleep on the couch. And his daughter was tiny too, you know, but she had dark hair. So he said he felt a little hand touch his shoulder, and then it touched his face, and he opened his eyes expecting to see the face of his child. It wasn't his child. It was another child standing there. She had beautiful blonde hair and ringlets and blue eyes. And she was completely naked, and she laughed and she ran away from him on the hall, and he said it scared the hell out of him. And he's a big guy, so you know his wife teased him a little bit. She had an experience. She had heard 2 stories about this. Right after the husband saw her, they had a dog that got hit by a car. So then the woman finally had her experience with this little girl, and right after she was attacked downtown, she got mugged. So she started to put together that every time this girl would show up, it was like an omen and a warning that something bad was going to happen. So she started to ask in the neighborhood about, you know, was there ever anything that happened in the house? And people said, yeah, there was a little girl that drowned in the bathtub. But she didn't go any farther with it. She told the paper the story, and then she actually told the National Enquirer too. But I was able to go back through the newspapers, and this was happening like 76. Way back in 61, in that same house, a little girl did die in the bathtub, but it was worse than just a drowning. Her uncle was watching her while her parents were out of town, and he had drawn her a bath, but it was too hot, so he was having her wait out, and she fell he went out to get something and came back and she had fallen in. Horribly burned. She didn't, she lasted long enough to get to the hospital. But the woman truly believes that because of this girl experiencing this accident, that she's trying to warn this family now when things are going to happen. So after the third thing happened, they really started to pay attention when she would show up. I haven't been able to find them after they moved out of the house to see if the girl stayed with the family or with the house. So if you guys hear anything, on the west side of town about a little girl ghost, let me know.
Good stories.
Thank you.